everybody. Welcome to Life Science Live. Super excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today's topic, we are going to be learning about furs, skins, and other kinds of animal coverings. So it should be a lot of fun. I'll give it a second to let people go ahead and jump on and watch the video. So first of all, I want everybody who's watching this to think of an animal that is covered in fur. You can think of any animal that you know of that's covered in fur. So you have your animal pictured in your mind, and now that you're thinking of your animal, think about the color of it. Now what color the fur of the animal is. You're probably thinking of a color that's either brown or black or gray or maybe reddish, or just an overall general really neutral color of fur. And that's because for the most part, fur is a very important adaptation to help animals blend in and to help them have camouflage. So I'm going to show you guys this fur here. This is the fur of a white-tailed deer. And you'll see that it has kind of those brownish, tan, very neutral colors on it. You've probably never seen a bright pink or a bright purple or a lime green deer in the wild. Maybe think to yourself for a minute, why would that be a bad idea? Why would it be not very smart for a deer to have bright colors on it? And the reason I think of that it would be really hard for a deer to survive in the wild with really bright colors is because it would stick out so bad, it would be really easy for a predator to find it. With this kind of brownish tan color of the fur, the deer would be able to blend in really well with the dirt or with the rocks in either the grassland or the forest or the woods or wherever it lives. It would be able to blend in really easily. And white-tailed deer have a really cool adaptation where they shed their fur at different times of the year so they match their environment better. So during the spring and the summer and the fall months, they have this kind of brownish color on them so they can blend in with their environment. But during the winter, they shed this brownish fur and they get kind of a silvery gray coat so that it blends in better with the snow and the landscape that it deals with there. Let's see, we're having trouble with the sound. We'll try and get a little closer. All right, hopefully that's a little bit better. But yeah, so this is the white-tailed deer, like I said, and the white-tailed deer have that adaptation where they're able to shed their fur so that they have a silvery grayish coat in the winter, and they have a browner coat during the fall and the summer months when they would be around those colors. So that's one really cool adaptation about fur being able to help with camouflage. I have another fur here, another animal that is a master of camouflage, a master of disguise. This is a leopard print. You might think that having spots would make it really easy to be able to see, right? Because it's kind of a really loud pattern on an animal, but spots are actually really, really good camouflage. You'll see that the spots aren't perfect circles. They're not very round. They're kind of irregular shapes and they're kind of in a random pattern. That's because in nature there are very few perfectly placed patterns in the landscape. And so having kind of the irregularity helps it to be able to blend in and to match the areas that would live. And leopards are found in a lot of grasslands and in savanna, and they can be found in the woods. So these irregular spots can help it blend in really well. And also the various colorations. If you think about some grasslands you might have seen, they kind of look like this yellowish orangish color, so it would be really good camouflage for the leopard to be able to hide, to be able to blend in. All right, so those were two super good masters of disguises, and I have another fur that I want to show you guys that has some really cool adaptations with it. So this is the fur of a musk ox. And you can see it is really thick and really big. And if you don't know what a musk ox is, I have one right behind me right here. This is a musk ox. So musk oxen are often found in the tundra regions of Canada. They're found in Greenland and in some areas in Siberia. And in these places of the world, the temperatures are so cold. During the winter, they can average as low as -40 degrees Fahrenheit and only get up to 54 degrees in the summer. And 54 degrees, that's still pretty chilly. It doesn't get very hot any time of the year where these oxen are from. So if you look at these pelts, if you look at this fur here, maybe think to yourself, why would this be a helpful fur for an animal that lived in the Arctic or in the tundra? What are some adaptations that you notice? The first thing that sticks out to me is how absolutely thick and how long this fur is. It's incredibly dense, and you can kind of see it on the camera here. That's because it helps act as a really big, thick, warm winter coat for the ox so that they're able to survive really, really cold environments. And I'll try and show it in the camera here. Musk ox have 2 layers to their fur. So the first layer underneath here, you'll see is kind of woolen. It's very, very thick and very, very compacted together. So they have this underwool underneath the top layer of their fur, which is this stuff right here, that is really, really long and really coarse. So the underwool part, that's the really, really warm stuff. And during the summer months, the oxen will shed that underwool part so that they don't get too hot during the summer. And then they regrow for the winter again. And humans like to use this wool a lot of times to make clothes. So it will be collected a lot of times. Musk oxen are kept domesticated so that they can be used to collect the wool to make clothes. And it's a little bit different. We also use sheep wool to make clothes, but this is a little bit different in that we don't shear the musk ox because this top part is very coarse and very scratchy. It would be very uncomfortable to have clothes made out of this. So we only use the under part. So rather than shear the musk ox to get the wool off, we just kind of comb it out as it sheds and make the yarn and make the clothes out of it. So musk ox are super cool because they are able to help us have clothes as well, and they use that wool to keep themselves warm in the summer. So that is the pelt of a musk ox. All right, so we talked about some animals so far that are covered in fur, and now we're going to talk about an animal that you might not think of as being covered in fur, and that is a rhinoceros. So rhinoceros do in fact have some fur on them. Rhinos are considered mammals, and one of the qualifications for an animal to be considered a mammal is that it has to have some kind of hair or fur on it somewhere. So I have this rhino foot right here, and I'm going to try really hard to show it on the camera. It might be kind of hard to see, but you can see up against the toes here. Let me put my finger back here. You can kind of see, if you see along my finger, there are some really coarse hairs right there by its toes. So they're not covered in fur the same way that the ox was, in the same way that the deer or the leopard were, but they still have a little bit of hair on them, so they are considered mammals because they do have that little bit of hair on them. Rhinos are different. They don't necessarily need the fur to help keep them warm because they live in some really warm parts of Africa and Asia, so they don't need fur to keep them warm. And you'll see on the foot that their skin is already a very neutral color. It would blend in very well with their environment, so they don't need fur for camouflage, so it's just not really necessary for them to have any fur. Instead of having fur, they have very, very thick skin. I have this little piece of, this is a piece of rhino skin, and if you look on the side, you can see it is very, very thick. Much thicker than our skin, for example. Look, it's thicker than my entire finger, so it's a very thick piece of skin. And so the rhino uses this really thick piece of skin for protection. But even though it's really thick, it is also very sensitive to things like bug bites and sunburn. So to combat this, the rhinos will do this really cool thing where they wallow in the mud. So they just kind of roll around in the dirt and in the mud, and they use the mud as a kind of sunscreen or as a kind of a bug spray to help keep the things that would harm their skin off. So that is how rhinos combat the fact that they do not have any fur to protect their skin. They use mud to do that. All right, so some animals are covered in skin, some animals are covered in fur, and some animals, especially reptiles, are covered in scales. So let's talk about scales for a second. So I have right here, this is an alligator leg, and you'll see that it has those scales on it. So alligators are a little bit unique in their scales because their scales are made out of keratin as compared to many other reptiles where their scales are just another layer of epidermis. So the alligator scales are very, very hard because the keratin is a very hard element that the scales are made out of. So it's a very protective layer for the alligator, and it helps keep them safe. Another reason that alligator scales are different is because, I'll try and show it on the camera again here, you'll see the scales are separated. There's kind of a ridge in between all the scales. And for the most part, in other reptiles, their scales are fused. So I have a snake here. This is a Louisiana pine snake. It might be kind of hard to see on the camera, but if you'll see, the scales are all fused together. There's not that same kind of ridge that there is in between the alligator scales. Let me show them both together. So the benefit of having, So the benefit of having the separation between the scales is it gives the alligator a greater range of mobility. So they're able to move really fast, and they have a super good range of mobility because of the fact that their scales are separated. So let's go back to the snake real quick. All right, so like I said earlier, other reptiles, their scales aren't near as hard as the alligators. They're a lot softer. So the snake is an example of one of those things where the scales are just another layer of epidermis. So they do offer protection, but not quite in the same way that the alligator scales would. And snakes do this really cool thing where they shed their skins every so often. So in baby snakes and little snakes, it can be up to 4 times a year. And in adult snakes, it's only 1 to 2 times a year. So I have these snake sheddings right here. Let me get a couple to show you. All right, so these are the sheddings from a snake. You'll see they're very, very thin. They're very delicate. And that's because it's just the very first top layer of the snake skin that is shed. And you can see here a little bit better how the scales are all fused together. There's not the separation like there was on the alligator skin. So one of the reasons that snakes shed their scales is because they aren't able to really repair them or to get parasites or other kinds of things that grow on the scales off by themselves. So in order to kind of clean themselves and to get rid of the parasites and those kind of things, they will shed the skin completely off. And so they just get kind of a fresh start every so often. For baby snakes or for young snakes, it's 4 times a year, and for older ones, it goes down to 1 to 2 times. So that is the snake skin. All right, so we have talked about fur, we've talked about skin, and we've talked about scales. But there is another kind of covering that we have not yet talked about, and that is feathers. So we're going to talk about birds for just a second. So feathers have lots of advantages for birds. One reason that birds use feathers rather than like hair or fur is because feathers are very lightweight. Hair can get to be super, super heavy. Those of you that have really long hair or long, thick hair might know that it gets to be really heavy, even on humans, on our heads. And for an animal like the musk ox, let me get this fur again here. This is a pretty heavy, I know you can't feel it at home, but it's pretty heavy. Fur can get to weigh a lot. Same with hair. And the scales are pretty heavy as well, especially the alligator scales. And birds want to be as lightweight as possible because they're flying around and they have to work a lot harder for any extra weight that they have. So birds have all sorts of adaptations that make them as lightweight as possible. And feathers are one way that they do that. Feathers help them to stay warm, they help them to stay dry, they help them to fly. So feathers have all sorts of benefits and they don't weigh a lot, which is awesome. So like I just mentioned, feathers help birds to stay warm. So I have this feather here. And if you'll remember just a few minutes ago, we talked about the musk ox. And the musk ox have 2 layers to their fur. They have the top layer, and then they have the bottom layer, which is like the wool that keeps them warm. And birds kind of have the same thing going on. They have this top layer here that acts as a protection. It helps them fly, it helps keep them dry. And then they have this bottom layer here that's kind of fluffier. That's called the downy part of the feather. And it's really soft and it's really warm. And that's what the bird uses to be able to keep warm. Birds a lot of times get themselves into situations that are really cold. We know ducks and other kinds of birds really like the water, so they go into the water a lot where it can be really cold. They fly up high where the temperatures are much cooler, and so the feathers are a very important adaptation to help keep them warm and help keep them dry. So that is one really cool thing about the birds. All right, if you remember at the beginning of the show, we talked about how fur is often really neutral, a really neutral color to help the animals blend in. But that is not the case for birds. Birds are often very bright colors. So I'm going to show you here. I have a ring-necked pheasant. And I'll try and show the colors as best I can. They're very iridescent, so it kind of depends on how the light hits it. But if you'll see, he has pretty bright coloring. He has purple and green on his face, and he's got the red, and he's got reddish, orangish feathers on his back and on his breast, and so he's a very bright colored bird. And birds use their bright colors to attract mates. So often it's the males of the bird species that are bright colored, and that's because the males are the ones that are trying to attract a mate, and then the females are dull colors because females are often the ones that protect the eggs, so they want to be able to blend in so that when they sit on the nest, they cannot be spotted by predators as easily. So that is one reason that males are much more brightly colored than the females. And birds don't always have the really bright colors about them. We talked about how snakes will shed their skin, and like that, birds will molt their feathers, which is where they will lose their feathers and regrow new ones. So one of the reasons is for camouflage. So at different parts of the years, different birds can have different colors, kind of like how the deer has a silvery grayish coat during the winter and a brownish coat during the summer. Birds will sometimes molt their feathers so they have different colors to blend in with their environment better at different times of the year. And then also during the breeding season is when the birds will usually have really bright colors. And then for some species, they will molt those really bright colors to have dull colors so they blend in easier. And another reason that they molt, kind of the same reason that the snakes will shed their skin, is so that they can get rid of any parasites. The feathers, let me get the feather again. Bird feathers aren't alive. They're kind of like our hair or fingernails. So they can't repair them if they get damaged. So the way that they replace their broken or damaged feathers is by just shedding it and getting new ones. So that is how birds deal with that. And that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. It was a lot of fun to learn about different animal coverings, talking about the furs and the skins and the scales and the feathers. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Remember to tune in tomorrow at 11 o'clock. We'll have Discovery Reading, which will be so much fun. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.